morning, everyone. Good morning, members of the MAG 911 Study Committee. My name is Chris Brady. I'm going to call this meeting to order now. For those around the table, please turn on your microphone when speaking. For those participating via Zoom, please state your name when making a comment or asking a question. The MAG public comment process allows members of the public to comment on items on today's agenda or on items that fall under MAG's jurisdiction. If you would like to comment at today's meeting, please fill out a white request to speak card located on the information table and give it to MAG staff. If you parked in the garage, parking validators are available on the information table. If you purchase a transit ticket to come to the meeting, please see staff for a ticket. Hearing assisted devices are available from MAG staff. We will now begin the meeting with a roll call of all members. So if MAG staff will do the roll call, please.
Thank you, Chair. I will go through the list of members. When I call your name, please indicate you are present for the record. Dale Nanigay.
Present by Zoom.
Thank you. Dan Cotterman.
Here.
Thank you. Joshua Wright.
Present.
Thank you. David Raymer.
I'm on Zoom.
Thank you, David. Chair Phelps.
Here.
Thank you. Santiago Rodriguez.
Present on Zoom.
Perfect. Thank you. Chair Brady.
Here.
Thank you. Travis Cutright.
Here.
Thank you. Brittany Brunet.
Present.
Thank you. Scott Walker.
Here.
Thank you. Jesse Cooper.
Present, attending virtually.
Thank you, Jesse. Robert Bokinski. Karen Sutherland.
Present.
Thank you. Catherine Masters. Chair, we do have a quorum.
Thank you very much. Appreciate that. Okay, we'll now proceed to agenda item number 2. Our next item is a call to the audience. This is an opportunity for the public to comment on items that fall under MAG's jurisdiction that are not on the agenda or that are on the agenda for discussion and not for action. 15 minutes will be provided to all for the call to the audience agenda item, unless the committee requests an exception to this limit. Have we received any requests?
No, we haven't received any requests to
Don't
speak.
have any requests. Okay. MAG also provides the opportunity for members of the public to submit written comments via the MAG website 1 hour prior to the meeting. Do we have any written comments for this item?
No, Chair, we do not have any written public comments.
All right. So we have no comments. Okay, now we'll proceed to agenda item number 3. Item number 3 is approval of the November 21st, 2022 meeting minutes. Does any member of the committee have any questions or comments on the minutes? All right. Prior to the approval of this item, do we have any members of the public who wish to comment on this item? So I'm assuming we haven't received any cards for that. Okay. Do we have any written comments for this item?
No, Chair, we do not.
So I would entertain a motion to approve the minutes. So I have a motion for approval.
Motion to adopt November 21st, 2022.
Okay, thank you. We have a motion for approval from Chair Phelps. Do I have a second?
Second.
It's Travis's birthday. Can we let him have a second? Travis will have the second. We have a motion and a second. All right. Can I have a voice vote of those in the room? Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Are any nays? No. Okay. Staff, can you take a roll call for the members participating virtually, please?
I will go through the list of members participating virtually. Please indicate how you vote when I call your name. Dale Nanigay.
Aye.
Thank you. David Raymer.
I approve.
Thank you. Santiago Rodriguez.
Aye.
Thank you. Jesse Cooper.
Aye.
Thank you. Is there anyone that I missed? All right,
Okay.
Chair, the motion passes.
All right, thank you. We'll now proceed to agenda item number 4. This is titled draft proposed scope. The next item is draft proposed scope for the 911 consultant services, which is on the agenda for approval by the committee. Nathan Pryor, MAG Policy and Government Relations Director, and Audrey Skidmore, MAG Information Technology Director, will provide an update. We're seeking input from the study committee to finalize the scope and seeking approval from the committee as an action on the item. All right, so we get that update from staff.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the study committee. Since we last met per direction of the study committee, we have been working on the draft scope for consultant. Appreciate the feedback received regarding questions and issues from members of the study committee and others. We did have a internal meeting where we started working on draft scope, helped get more information, more input when the subgroup of this committee met. So appreciate the time and involvement with that. Appreciate also staff working back to the co-chairs in terms of informing and making sure we're on the right path with the draft scope. The draft scope is in the agenda packet. If you don't have one, we do have extra copies available if you need to look at that and follow along. With that, Mr. Chairman, I'll turn over to Audrey Skidmore to provide more detail on the draft proposed scope.
Thank you, Chairman, members of the committee. The scope has 3 primary goals: an assessment of where we want the ideal system to be, what kind of system are we really looking to achieve, looking at peer regions and technologies that are available in the market today, and then finally comparing the option that the state has available, our existing system, and also possible combinations or other technologies against our ideal. At each point, we would come back to the committee with a presentation. The advisory group, subgroup would work to initially review and provide feedback on the consultant work products. I did have one suggested change to the draft scope, which is that in task 2, when we're looking at peer regions, that we put a number on how many of those we want to look at to make it easier to get accurate and comparable pricing. In our initial discussions, we thought 5 was a reasonable number. And I would be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Any questions from, yes, Josh, go ahead.
Yeah,
please.
thank you, Chair. Just one clarification question I was thinking about. So when we say for task 1, all MR 911 agencies will be interviewed, are we including those really all PSAPs in the region? Because I know we've had at least 2 that I can think of that have since moved over to procuring their services from a different vendor. And I'm assuming we want to hear from them too. So I just want to clarify that as part of the scope.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Wright. Those 2 members are MAG member agencies, currently still operating within PSAP manager oversight team kind of governance structure. So we'll fulfill that and reach out to them and include them part of the discussion interview.
Thank you.
Thanks, good question. Anyone else? So again, we have those in front of us. Their goals are the assessment of the regional 911 system, right, and then task 2 is provide assessment of current and emerging 911 technologies. And the third is the evaluation and recommendation of the 911 technologies. So I know it's been out there floating around, so probably had a chance to look at it. Appreciate the work going into it and the input on this. Obviously, as we go through the decision-making process and the consultant, this gives everybody an expectation of what for all the groups will be responding. We'll have a kind of a understanding of what we're looking for. But obviously, as we get into the selection process, we'll be able to get into different parts of these tasks with the actual consultant that we select, right? So what happened? Now, so we have this proposed, we're going to have a vote on this. So this will become the scope of work that would then be provided to potential firms. Is that how that works? Nathan, walk us through that just a little bit.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. The next item, Audrey Skidmore will provide an update on more of the consultant selection process. We'll kind
We'll
of
get
walk
to
through that
that. So I'm
timeline.
getting ahead of myself. So really, we want to just take action on this scope. Then we'll talk about how we use this in helping the selection.
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, I'm getting ahead of myself. All right. There's no other questions on just the scope. We'll get into the selection process here in a second. All right. So this item is on the agenda for approval. Do we have any members of the public who wish to comment on this item? Assuming we don't have any written comments. All right, so now I will entertain a motion to approve. What are we going to approve the scope of work? Is that what we're doing? Is that the right action? Am I saying that right?
Yes, that's correct. With, if you don't mind, the limitation on the number of peer
Oh,
agencies.
right, with the idea that the limit, you mentioned the number that we would compare. I think 5 is generous. I think that's fine. Yeah, I wouldn't want to do any more than that, and anything less would be okay, but not much more. So I think it's a good number. So thank you for that. Yeah. Okay, so with that addition, all right, so we need to take a vote on this. Is this correct? Just like we did before. All right, so can I have a motion for approval of the scope of the work?
So moved.
Have a motion by
With the clarification.
clarification, addition of the 5. Do I have a second? Second. A second from Dan. All right, we have a motion, a second. For those in the room, all those in favor, please say aye.
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 Those opposed say nay. All right, and we'll have a roll call from those who are on virtually.
Thank you, Chair. For those virtually, when I call your name, please indicate how you vote. Dale Nanigay.
Aye.
Thank you, Dale. David Raymer.
I approve. Aye.
Thank you, David. Santiago Rodriguez.
Aye.
Thank you, Santiago. Jesse Cooper.
Aye.
Is there anyone I missed? Chair, the
Okay.
motion passes.
Thank you. All right, so now we will move to item 5. So the next item is an update on the consultant selection process with feedback requested on consideration for the selection. Audrey Skidmore will provide an update on this item. Audrey.
Thank you, Chair and members of the committee. I wanted to give, I have an anticipated timeline available. I wanted to give you just an overview of how we saw this happening. We are planning to stick with state contract vendors, which allows us to go out for quotes rather than go through an entire RFP process. We are looking right now with feedback from the committee on to 3 vendors who have had looks at the Maricopa Region 911 system before, which we feel will enable us to perhaps shorten the timeline a little bit since they're somewhat familiar with our system. We're considering IXP Corp, Mission Critical Partners, and Federal Engineering. They're all on state contract and are well known to do this type of work. With assuming that we proceed today, we would contact those vendors tomorrow to request that they provide us with quotes broken down by task and hours, list of availability, and then the qualifications of the assigned personnel. So resumes for the people who would be working on the project with details about when they would be available to start. Our hope would be to get the quotes and all those materials back by January 17th. After talking to our procurement, there's a strong feeling because of the holidays that to get detailed and accurate quotes, we really need to give them 4 weeks. We would then meet with the advisory group the week of the 17th to make a selection based on the information. And then move forward the following week on the 23rd to get your approval, and then regional council a few days later. We would then work with them to refine the quote and the scope and move forward. And then if you can move, there we go. So we would have them begin work on the 2nd, and then hit your meetings for reports out on the tasks. We would, of course, look at possibly running tasks 1 and 2 concurrently if the consultant availability is there, to try to get meet your preferred deadline of spring. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
All right. Any questions? Audrey, I know I have a few. Go ahead, Josh.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Thank you for trying to advance this process as quickly as possible. I just want to comment that it seems like a very aggressive timeline, which is wonderful to shoot for that. But I'm a little concerned about being able to get, I mean, you're talking about a month between selecting the vendor at the regional council level and having the first task already done. Maybe even a little less, actually, which is really assertive. And then the other clarification I'm just hoping to understand is, so management committee is on the 11th. The actual selection with regional council of the vendor is later, which makes sense, but the quotes and materials comes in between the two. So what would management committee, if anything, be doing on the 11th?
Yeah, thank you for that question, co-chairs and Mr. Wright. We built in our policy committee meetings. You can see there, of course, intergov meeting check-in, but management committee and executive committee, just showing those placeholders. I think in an ideal kind of normal process, we would be hitting management committee and going probably just to executive committee. But with the holidays and the way these meetings have kind of fallen, don't have that opportunity at this time. So we did a check-in internally. This is a little bit unusual, but moving aggressively with a study committee approving the selection on the 23rd, 2 days later having it already agendized for regional council on the 25th, recognizing that we are moving quickly. The hope and intent, of course, is to have some kind of conclusion to this part of the process in the spring, recognizing that approaching near the end of the fiscal year, if that work needs to be completed for any decision-making around that time, any budgeting issues. But to Ms. Skidmore's point, perhaps an opportunity to run tasks 1 and 2 concurrent, and maybe, once we get going, it's not task 1 being done on the 20th, but maybe 1 and 2 on the March 20th, a month later. I think we can work around that. But acknowledging it is aggressive, but hopefully get some results from this consultant for this committee's review for kind of decision-making going forward beyond that.
Audrey and Nathan, help clarify for me. So what you're saying is the first meeting, so the management committee on the 11th, or even the intergov on the 5th, the 11th, and the 17th. What are you taking? What's that agenda item look like? Because it looks like we're not going to actually have quotes and materials until the 17th. Is it just, talk to me what's on that? What does that agenda item look like for that group?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I don't think we'd actually envisioned agenda items for those meetings. But again, more just a placeholder and kind of a normal kind of committee flow and process. We would have hit those. Didn't want to leave them out and omit them. That they are there. If this body would like us to provide some kind of update or check-in, we could certainly do that at management committee. But in terms of actionables, we will not be ready.
Okay, because otherwise, if you wanted those groups to actually review, you'd push this whole thing back a month, right? And you're just showing and maybe an update, just letting them know that this is going forward, and they're not going to be able to see the quotes and materials, right? And a decision is probably going to be made for approval prior to the next scheduled management committee or executive committee.
That is correct, Mr. Chair.
Fair? And I think So I think of some kind of a briefing or letting them know, hey, we're trying to get this thing going quickly. So we're letting you know, but we can't tell you, cost or who it's going to be. But that's because, unless someone, and then somebody in that group says that's not acceptable, then we'll just move everything back a month or so, right? I mean, that would be the consequence of that. Is that fair?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, that's correct.
And which I think we have to give both those groups an opportunity to weigh in on that. We don't want to, but on the same time, I think we have to be very transparent to them. The train's moving, and if we want to meet this schedule, they're not going to get to see the details. We could do that, but then it moves out. And so I would just suggest be prepared that if they say, no, we want to be involved at that level, then what does that reset look like? Or what does that additional schedule look like? Does that make sense?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, it does.
And just, I know you have another option, but one of the things I would like to add to the selection process, and maybe it's already embedded and I just didn't hear you say it. I do think it's important as you're talking to these groups to ask them to give us some references of similar scopes of work, because I think that's always helpful for you to be able to follow up with some other location and kind of ask them what the experience was like. Okay. Did you have a question? Go ahead. Yes, Erin.
So going right along with this, on January 30th, where it says negotiate details, will this group be brought back together to do that?
Member Chair, I anticipated that the advisory group would work on some of those details. If you want it to come back through this group, we'll have to adjust the timeline accordingly, because we'll have to hit another meeting to take further action if that's your goal. We could certainly circulate it for feedback, but if you want to take action again, we will need to adjust.
Maybe you could clarify for us if we have a scope of work, right? And assuming that's not, we've approved that, so that stays. What is negotiate details? What does that mean to staff? What does that represent to you? What kind of detail? There's cost.
Right.
And so what else might that include?
There's cost. We may have to reevaluate based on the quotes we get back, timing, cost, perhaps the depth of interviews. And so until we get the quotes, we don't exactly know what that is. I think I would foresee if we had a major revision that we would come back to the group. But I would think if we were nibbling around the edges, so to speak, that it wouldn't be worth holding up the entire process for another month. And I guess that would be up to you, how much control you want to have over that. And I would also point out this is an anticipated timeline. We're going to be somewhat at the mercy of the consultant availability, and also the availability of you and your staff for the interviews. And so I don't anticipate we would put the exact termination of the contract. I think we would give ourselves a little room because we might have to shift just based on availability.
Any other questions? So January 17th seems like I don't know if it's a train wreck or a big, there's a lot going on that day, right? So you have executive committee, you have the quotes are due. I'm assuming you haven't reviewed them. They're just show up at end of business day. Is that typically how you word it? Okay. And then we meet though that same day, but we won't have that with us, right? But it says the week.
We wouldn't meet on the 17th. We would meet sometime that week. So we would
The
distribute those.
17th, what day of the week? Is that
I believe it's a Tuesday.
okay, so we could meet later. The assumption would be that, okay, when it says 17th, it might be Thursday or something like that. Okay.
Yeah, we would distribute them to the members of the
Okay,
advisory team,
okay,
give them a
that
chance to review them and meet.
Well, and we can adjust. I think the key here, right, is to get the scope out to the three in groups that are on the state contract, which makes that help simplify that part of the solicitation process. So we'll get that out the door, and really then I think what we'll see is what we see on the week of the 17th. We'll get that response, and then we can kind of assess as a group where we want to go. I mean, we have this in front of us, but we can adjust from there. Does that make sense to everybody? Okay.
Yes, Chair, that is what we would hope. We would really adjust this entire timeline based
Right.
on what we actually receive and the feedback we get in terms of how to proceed. But this is just a aspirational timeline so that we can, so we're trying to meet the deadlines that you have as agencies. And this is what would be required.
Do you have built into the time that you release the scope of work and the time it's due? Is there a date in there where the consultants that you're going to have an opportunity for them to come in and ask questions among, where sometimes you say everybody might have a question or whatever, you just have everybody come into the room together, right? And you answer questions. Do you have a day like that, or or were you just going to send it out and get a response back?
We had anticipated taking questions throughout the process, but we could
Oh,
certainly
okay. So
do,
there's.
do
Okay, so you-
something more formal.
No, it's just how sometimes the process are, but you're okay with, they'll be able to reach out to you and ask questions from the time you send this out.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, our procurement officer is actually back there
Okay.
from there, and he's gonna contact them and make sure that he gets their questions and that we
Okay.
get them taken care of. Anything we can do to accelerate the process, basically, we'll be doing.
I think we want to do it expeditiously, but we also want to make sure we get it done so we all feel like it's thorough and vetted well and transparent, right? So it's kind of, I know it's a balance of all those things. Sometimes being quick, sometimes we lose the opportunity to be transparent and make opportunity for everybody to look on things. So we'll make sure we balance that out. And
Yes, Rocky, have I missed anything, or do you? You'll have to come to the table.
Mr. Chairman, this is Rocky Advani. He's with Max Fiscal Services Office.
oh, good. Welcome.
Thank you.
Good. Okay. Fair enough.
Rocky, we have a defined team. And
It's a
it
little
may be more than 3 or
3B,
4, but but it is already defined.
okay. Excellent. All right. Sounds like we're going to go this one step at a time and we'll keep assessing and talking after that. All right. So we need. That's it. We don't need this on this item. You're just informing us of the process.
Correct, Mr. Chairman. Information is providing direction to proceed.
Okay. Thank you very much for that. All right, we're going to move to item number 6, fiscal overview. We're going to get a fiscal status update from the MR 911 staff. Liz, is that yours? And our 911 administrator will provide this update. Go ahead, Liz.
Thank you, Chairman Brady and committee members. There are actually 3 slides that I had to use to get everything on here. This is just a high overview, understanding our budget. We do
Wait,
have
you said high? How high?
well, it's high as you
500
need.
feet or
it to be.
10,000?
Whatever you wish. So we have to give you a background, we have a budget working group that works with MR 911 staff on looking at the different purchases and budget and monies left over. We're hoping that this will allow us more insight on when we need to reallocate money, that what is left on the table unspent. So they get more into the details. This is what we use as our staff when we are tracking what our expenditures are. So just to give you a high view. And one more point, this is the latest the latest one that we submitted to the state for a grant amendment. If you remember that we need to get their approval if we need to add or change funds or reallocate funds. So this has been submitted to the state for an amendment. So we basically, when we set up this every fiscal year, the middle column there in the blue represents what was approved, the amount. On the big spreadsheet, you'll notice that on the first column that's in black, that's what's been spent to date. And then we have the over and under, which is the third column, and that allows us to see what we have left over. So going through the slides, this is all contractual. These are our monthly bills, as it were, that mostly telecom carriers. These will change as we move to NG 911 because the legacy connections needed with the telephone carriers will not be required. It will be more of an IP based. And go to the second slide. This represents what we call our PSAP's needs. So anything that has to do directly with the PSAP and their equipment. Those first ones are the projects that are slated for fiscal year 2023. You'll notice nothing has been spent on them. We're waiting for approval from the state on that budget amendment. And then we have additional equipment requested by the PSAPs. Just as a note, if you see login recording Gilbert, town of Gilbert has rescinded those reimbursement requests, so those monies can be reallocated. And then the rest has to do with maintenance, maintenance support, support for the equipment, annual support, anything that has to do with the team on that day-to-day taking care of the PSAP's equipment. And then the last slide has to do with the networking. So the 911 network is what allows us to do 911 call management. We've had a network in place since 2000. And since we started in 2005, and it's grown over the years, and the complexity with the technology changes has grown as well. So we have network equipment, servers, routers, firewalls, all the things that you hear when you're building a network. We have those go through. We have equipment that we have to change out and updates every year. So those are reflected in there. And then our last total has to do with mapping. That's a GIS as part of the city of Phoenix. We're part of the enterprise Esri license they get for all their departments in the city of Phoenix, our shop being one of them. And so we get prorated a certain portion to pay for that privilege. So at the very bottom, you can see that our budget request was, our amendment isn't, or our total budget was $9,975,872.24. Of that, we've spent $3,213,551.35, and you can see the 6.7 is what we have left over. So this helps us keep a running total to see where we're going to, where we're short and where we need equipment. If you can go back to slide 2, I'll give you an example. If you look down near the middle, you see project peripherals. We're actually in the red on that by 5,000. We can buy, this is an example. We buy monitors because we can get them $200 cheaper a piece if we buy them instead of going through the vendor. When we made that purchase, we failed to balance it out in the budget request, but we do have other monies slated for that. So that will be balanced out. But that is how we track to say, you know, and that will help us next year when we're doing our budget. That this is where we need monies added into. And then it also helps us of what doesn't need to be budgeted so much. So with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Go ahead.
Okay, I do have a couple of questions. At the beginning of your statement, you were talking about the budget committee through the PSAP manager working group. And I just want to confirm, have these documents over the past couple of years, have you been working with the budget committee?
So the budget, we started the working group just a few years ago. So we gave them not this specific one, but we have been giving them budget forms that they've gone over with on what our allocations are. And before we did the budget, it has, for obvious reasons, has changed into a more in-depth.
Okay, so they have reviewed this. I don't recall any updates from the budget committee on looking at any of the expenditures that were anticipated when this was going in.
So the budget committee prior to this year were focused on creating the budget itself and did not go over the expenditures.
But they did create the budget.
They assisted in it, yes.
Okay. Also, at our last study committee meeting, we talked quite a bit about the funds that come to Maricopa County as opposed to the rest of the state. And there was a lot of conversation about that. But for the last several years, we have not spent the money that we were allocated. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Kevin. Thank you. Ms. Graber, I'm sure you have a lot more detail on your budget, obviously, than this, but this, to me, I don't know how I draw any conclusion on this. I mean, there's no trend forecast. It just shows what's available. I don't know what's expected to be going against these amounts. So, help me, understand, or maybe I just missed something. This just to me looks like this is what's available, but I don't know at any point, are we ahead of schedule, behind schedule on expenses, or in terms of how we anticipated our budget to play out for an entire budget year?
And Chairman Phelps and committee members, I apologize. I thought I was to give a report on what our current fundings and what expenditures we had. And so that's what I prepared, but we can do trends on it. I can tell you by that our equipment, all the upgrades that we have is we are behind on getting that ordered. And because of the supply chain issues and everything, we need to get that equipment ordered so we can get them done and in place and invoiced by the end of June.
And then just for my understanding, so let's just say we have a project that we have a supply issue. We're not going to be able to get it expended during this current budget year. Do we move money around on a project that maybe is coming up short on resources? How do you, what's the process for how you would reallocate money that's unspent on maybe another priority? Do you bring another priority up that can be expended during this budget year?
So one of the things they worked on last year, the working group for governance, was to prioritize spending of the budget or where the monies would go to. So we do have some guidelines for that. We would have the working group meet and discuss where it would be presented for approval with PSAP managers, but we ultimately still have to go to the state to get their approval for changing the monies around, even if we keep within the fiscal footprint.
Josh, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. And my comments probably echo Mr. Phelps a little bit. I was having trouble trying to interpret what I was looking at here. I think it's more just a ledger or a snapshot in time, I guess, is what we're probably looking at here. So just for my own edification, so the budget that you have in blue, that's money that the state has said, yes, it's yours, but we just haven't spent it yet because we're waiting on procurement issues or other logistical problems. Is that
No,
what
this
I'm
is
reading, or?
sort of, this is what's been presented to the state. They have not answered us on the approval of the budget. Some adjustments have had to be made on the projects. And so we are waiting to get an approval from them to move forward. And once that approval is given, then we will create the purchase orders and start ordering the equipment. But this is what we're hoping to work off of pending the approval from the state.
I guess what's confusing to me about that statement, though, is so there's a budget and then there's the actual implementation of the projects that you've asked for. So have they said, as part of your budget, and the state has to set a budget too, do they not get that specific and divvying up, this is going to be what MAGs or the MR 911 budget's going to be, and whatever projects they ask for, we'll approve them through whatever their process is. do they not know what the total is for our region up front, or we're kind of, it's like almost like an evolving budget is what I'm hearing you describe.
It is. So the original budget is approved in when the grant is received and approved in a January, February timeframe. But as we get quotes in and as things change on costs, we do have to make adjustments to it. That's not unusual. That's happened for years. And with the new grant process, having that approval to make those adjustments, and they don't give us an approval as a whole, like you get this money to manage all the components that you have to buy. They look at each of the components and determine whether they'll fund this or they won't fund that. So there have been times that they've denied additional positions on equipment. They get more into detail instead of just, here is $9.9 million for you to manage 911.
So by when does that 9.975 as a whole have to be submitted every year? Does that get incorporated into the state's budget process, even if they haven't given specific approval on the elements?
So the timeline, a high level is we usually get the grant notice of funding. We apply in the end of the year. They give us approval January, February timeframe. Then we, at that point, put the budget, start getting the city of Phoenix budget process together, because since they're the procurement agency at that point, so that the approval through the city council and everything that goes with that and payment ordinances. So by July 1st, we can start spending the money. The state requires the money to be completely spent by June 30th. And equipment, and not just encumbered, equipment has to be received. So that makes it a little tricky when you have as much of equipment that we have, and when there's supply chain issues or any issues with quotes or invoices that have to be trued up. That's where we run into problems, especially last year.
And just, sorry, last question, if, as I think Mr. Phelps was implying, so if there's a number left in green at the end of each of these June 30ths, does that automatically roll forward for the same projects to spend, or we have to go through the whole process again?
No, we have to go through the whole process again, and it's a reimbursement grant. So the city of Phoenix pays for everything and then seeks reimbursement from the state, so that the money is not as a whole forwarded to the city of Phoenix to spend. But yeah, you have to reapply for it. And we've had a couple of examples of that. We've had to move into another fiscal year.
Yeah, I think that would be helpful to see for me, as well as the trend line here of how much are we rolling forward. And I think you said about 18 million was the total state budget, right? Is that?
So the collection that they get every year from the telephone bills that the Department of Revenue collects is about 18 million, give or take. But the budget this year for the state 911 statewide for just the PSAPs was 22 million.
Thank you.
Brittany?
So probably echoing on what's already been said, could you add a column for the amendments and show what has been submitted to the state, the amount, and then what's been approved or not approved? Because just because an amendment's been submitted doesn't mean that it's going to be approved. And I think that might paint a better picture for all of us to kind of see what's current regarding that budget. Because I'm sure there's been amendments submitted to the state. So that's one suggestion I have. The other one I have is on page 1, when it's listing like Asurion, Allstream. I don't know about anybody else, but I don't know the definitions of some of those, if they're legacy, if they're wireless, and maybe adding some definitions to those. So we all know where those dollars are going. That's just a suggestion I have on that as well. So those are just the couple things that I had to comment on the budget. I don't know if anybody else has anything else.
Karen, go ahead.
So I was wondering on the Phoenix equipment on page 2, I think it is, where it's 1.8 something million. Is that the full cost of their upgrade, or is that the part that is being spent this year for it? Because I know that's a 2-year project.
The city of Phoenix is moving their police 911 center over to a new building. And they were slated for the upgrade in fiscal year 2023. But the building is not prepared at this date, so they asked if they could reschedule it to 2024. The problem is that it creates a rippling effect on all the other projects. If it gets pushed, then everything that was slated in 2024 gets pushed, and so on down the line, affecting other PSAPs in the region. So we discussed splitting the purchase of the Phoenix equipment to equipment only in this fiscal year, and that allowed us to pull up Avondale and ASU to help balance out the upgrade, because they were originally slated to 2024. And that way it wouldn't put the whole region behind on upgrades. The fiscal year 2024 budget grant will reflect the installation and warranties services part of the cost of the Phoenix budget. So it's basically split between equipment and services.
Okay, thank you. And then when I'm looking at Avondale and ASU, those costs seem really high. Have we received the quotes for those?
Yes.
And okay, and so 400,000 for ASU PD, they have how many seats?
I believe 4. I don't have the numbers in front of me.
And they're going Vesta, is that correct?
I believe so, yes.
Dan, but
Thank you, sir. Just a quick question. Is your group considered a division within the city of Phoenix? And the reason I ask that is, could then we go look at the city of Phoenix's budget if we wanted to see more detail about your group?
So, yes, it is. I'm trying to think of the process, because we're grant, and they do have, that is woven into the city of Phoenix budget as grants. So we are part of that. So they would be part of the whole package, but it would be reflected under the areas that are covered by grants.
Yeah, I would assume that would be the revenue stream covering the expenses, but I'm not sure if your division or your group is just sort of spread throughout police and fire and some other places, or if there's actually like one department or group that we could really go look at it in a more traditional way that we're used to looking at budgets. So
Yes, so we have, my office is housed under the fire department, and it's called Regional 911 Services. So it is specific to that. The PSAPs have their own, and that has nothing to do with the grant or our team, but for what we're talking about today, it is specifically under that.
thank you.
Travis, go ahead.
I may have missed this, and I don't have my glasses on, but so the numbers are the ones that have expenditures, those are operating. It looks like this is split up, like the ones that's got monies hit against it looks like operating expenses, and then the other ones are more like what I would call like capital or the upgrade, and those are the ones that's waiting for approval from state. I'm just wondering if the budget's not approved, how do you spend against it? So it seems like there's two different.
So there was a budget approved of 9.4 million. And that's where we can do a lot of that's where we get the day-to-day operations. Specifically, it changed because of the equipment, the upgrades. And that's the part we've held off until we get approval. But the day-to-day operations covered. If you go back to the first slide.
Right. So
Yeah, these are the things that we are taking care of. That's not that's
and
not
some of the ones on the next sheet also, like I see personnel
Yeah,
costs.
go ahead.
And different, that would be operating expenses.
Yep.
And then the rest of them was like capital. So maybe split them up or. I don't know.
Kevin?
I apologize. It's Monday morning and my latte machine didn't work this morning, so I'm not functioning probably as well as the rest of the members of the committee. If I heard you right, and I'm sure I didn't, but what my brain heard was we submit basically our request, and we have to get it to the state prior to June 30th, so that when the new budget cycle starts on July 1st, which we do, and yet we're sitting here almost halfway through the current fiscal year, and we don't know whether the state has approved the request that we submitted back in June?
So they approved the June budget was, which was 9.4. But for an example, they only approved 1.5 million for the Phoenix PD project, which was low, was not the amount of money they needed. So we did a amendment to ask, could they please amend this amount of money to receive it?
So most of the money that we're showing here then on the FY budget of the 9.9 million has been approved by the state.
Yeah, so 9.4 of it has been approved and we are
And there's
spending
about
it.
half a
Yeah.
million still in play.
Yeah,
Okay.
anything we can spend, we're doing it. We're not holding anything. The only thing we can't is the projects, because those are the numbers that change.
Okay, well, that makes a lot more sense, but
Okay.
it's always the open for the possibilities, however, from my experience, that it could have been the other way around.
So Liz, let me just clarify, follow up on that statement, because I think for some of us who do budgets and work with councils and even other grants, this is, I'm struggling to try to understand this process. So when I hear there's an approval by the state of the 9.9 million, we have to be careful with that word, because for some of us, that means green light, go spend, right? Go through a procurement process, just start spending it. But that's not 100% accurate. It's yes, we're going to set aside 9.9 million. You can go start spending it on everything that's been the line item that's been identified here, except for, and you keep calling it projects. And I guess my question is, why is it that the state holds back on projects versus licensing and operational, the day-to-day? Because it sounds like you have permission to keep, because you've got to keep paying bills, right? You've got to keep paying licensing agreements, paying salaries, all those that go with it. But they want to, even within that 9.9 million, there's millions available for projects, but then they want you to come back again for those for a secondary approval for the projects.
So because of the amounts that were approved in the original in June have changed, we have to have their permission to be able to buy the equipment.
So they control the budget, not at the 9.9 level. They control it at each of these line items.
That is
So they're
correct.
really not treating you as a grant. They're treating you as an extended agency of the state over which they now have line item control.
That is
Grant
correct.
is not accurate.
Yeah.
Is that fair? It's not the way we think of a grant. So we should be careful, probably for Phoenix's purposes, the way they have to organize their fiscal and set it aside as a grant. I get that. But you're really being overseen as a line item, detail of an agency of the state, is from what it appears to me, right? So again, but I may go, so on the operating side, licensing, let's say you have a license with CenturyLink and it comes in higher than what you had originally submitted. Do you have to go back to the state for that?
That's correct. Because to reallocate, so it's not going above, but it's also reallocating. We had leftover monies here. We're going to pay for it. Can we pay?
So they want to get into that detail. They don't care. They're not willing to say it's 9.9. If you have things that go over or under, you can manage that with that. You just come back, and we only want to hear if it's more than 9.9.
Correct. And part of the agreement is we send them all the detailed invoices we spend every month.
When you say agreement, is that in the form of some kind of IGA, or what is
It's
that?
in the grant agreement the state gives the city of Phoenix every year.
Yeah, Josh, go ahead.
Could I just clarify who at the state actually is the group or the person that gets into that level of detail that you just described?
That would be the state 911 office, and it's under the Department of Administration.
Even beyond that, though, is there a particular person that has been assigned that task or a committee, or how does that work to
So-
make the decision?
It is overseen, has been by the the 911 administrator at the state, Travis Jensen, and then he has a grant, gentleman that works for him that's a grant specialist, and the two of them. Yeah. Yes.
Brittany, Karen, would you, oh, Brittany,
I have one
was
more
okay.
question. So far this year, how many amendments have we submitted to the state?
4.
And what were those amendments for?
The first one, it has to do with the 1.67% that is listed in the administrative code, allowing monies towards administrative costs. And so in July, we asked those monies to be moved over, and that had not got approved. It was still pending when we put in the Phoenix PD's initial one. We submitted to have that monies changed, and then that was, they had questions on it. They wanted more detail on a scope of work and timelines. So we prepared that, and that had not been approved. And then they're looking at it, evaluating it. They had questions about fiscal 2024's grant amendment, grant submission, and I asked them if we could just focus on fiscal year 23's grant amendment, and that, you know, when we submit fiscal year 2024, which we haven't yet, it would sort itself out, and that had to do with the Phoenix PD project. So then this last one is one we added for Scottsdale, Tempe, and Glendale for some additional equipment that the PSAP requested. So I've submitted again. So every time I resubmit, it gets a little bigger. So the administrative costs on the Phoenix PD, now moving ASU, just that amendment keeps getting bigger and bigger.
So, but is that amendment you don't submit it one time? It sounds like the amendment continues to get added to.
Well, yeah, that's basically what's happened, because when I put one in July, it gets held. And then when I put another one in, the July one has been approved. So now I'm putting it, so it's just this constant getting bigger and bigger amendment as adjustments have been made.
All right. I don't know that we're going to solve any problems today. I actually feel like I'm falling deeper into a hole, but this is intriguing. This is a very different way of doing things that I think we, as much as painful it is to kind of learn more about it, I think it's helpful because it kind of goes to the efficiency of the operations and being able to stand up both the operations side and project sides in a timely manner. Is there a way, I'm curious the timing of like approving amendments. Is there a way that you can show us historically? Do you have that kind of information to say, okay, budget is approved here, we came back and added amendments. It takes, how long does it take to get? I'm just curious what that looks like.
There's nothing in writing, nothing in the grant agreement of when they can have a timeline to let us know one way or the other, but I can get a timeline built on what we've submitted this year.
Okay, that'd be helpful.
Chairman,
Yes.
maybe add a little context to having managed the fiscal services section for the Phoenix Fire Department, where Liz obviously resides, her section, is you're correct. It isn't your traditional grant, and we shouldn't think of it as such. That's one of my comments in the first meeting, was that if we could look at where the state could actually fund as more of a traditional grant, allocate around $10 million, allow us to manage that, of course, being held accountable to reporting as we are in any other grant, that would certainly clean up this process. Also, it's important to understand that this grant, I put in air quotes, is only a new process for the state to apply the funds. That changed. This is just the third year, I believe, in this process. So there has been a learning curve at the state and at our side is how to manage this. It is very granular. It is very challenging, and within a funding source, you have to get approval to reallocate within that source or anything, as you can only imagine in our own cities and departments. So that helps some context in this. It is challenging in the structure we're in.
I mean, this is a bizarre thing to say, but I'd almost rather get the money from the federal government than from the state under this pretense, which I'd never thought I'd ever say. You know what I'm saying? Because at least there you have an agreement, you know what you have to, you're limited to spend it on, but there's no line item control. And then and I think we would be willing to do an audit, a single audit at the end to give them assurance that we adhere to all the requirements. So something to think about. So before we leave this item, obviously, I think maybe we have some more conversations. Let's give direction though, maybe some thoughts. Is there anything specifically, generally, that you think would be helpful for this group to give guidance to the staff about a follow-up? What more would we like to see on this item? Any thoughts? Scott, go ahead.
Chairman Brady and Chairman Phelps, I have made notes from the comments. I do understand and I appreciate it's hard to ascertain really what we're seeing here, having look at budgets and spreadsheets daily as all of you do. So I did make notes of everything that was said. I think I can work with Liz to put this into a form that I think will help us better understand really real time where things are at and what's projected.
Okay, that'd be helpful. Thank you. Anyone else?
Yes,
Karen.
I would like to see some of the quotes for the equipment for the different agencies as well.
Okay. I'll try to keep this fairly high level though. And maybe Nathan, I don't know, maybe working with the intergovs, let's kind of think about other air quotes grants that cities have with the state in other areas. And maybe there's another kind of relationship of finance that flows to the cities. I don't know if it's airports. I don't know, help me think about other examples. Maybe you could come back and say, I don't know if it's next meeting, at some point, maybe it may be helpful for us to go back to state and say, hey, we'd rather be treated like this than that. Because it almost seems like we're duplicating this expertise about, well, what's best for the cities, and we'll tell you what we think is best for you versus you get to make that decision for yourself. And we're like, no, we think we have the expertise. We'd like to spend the money, but meets within the guidelines and the requirements of the statute or whatever the money being collected for. Let us spend it. We'll have an independent auditor tell you that we did that and conform to it, and we'll send that to you. But I don't know if there's something like that is already existing. Maybe between the cities, we could kind of think of those opportunities. Does that make sense?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, it does. Appreciate that
Okay.
guidance.
Anything else? Yes, Liz,
Matt,
go ahead.
just make sure, clarification for me. Are we wanting quotes to be reviewed in this meeting? Because right now we're
It's just
doing
an
that.
example. This is not the group that's going to approve budgets.
Okay,
Yeah, no, I didn't sign up for that. Did you? Okay, I didn't do that.
because
no.
we can do that in other MAG meetings with.
Where
PSAP.
does that take place typically?
So we could do that with the budget working group, the PSAP managers and the 911 oversight under that.
Specifically, your concern is what on that?
Well, my concern is that the budget is a large portion of the reason that we're here. It was not reviewed in the PSAP manager meeting. It was not approved in the PSAP manager meeting. Went to the oversight committee where it was approved.
All right. So maybe
somebody needs to be looking at these.
Yeah, and Karen, I think that's a great point. I think the point there being is this isn't the committee to actually do that work. But I think what you're suggesting, I think is important, is that what we can look at is the process, what you were just talking at the end, what it should be the process for creating the budgets, approving the budgets, and kind of the reconciliation of the budget. Who should be involved in that?
That's correct.
Okay. So maybe at some point, that's part of this, not just the numbers, but the process we need to understand better. Go ahead, Nathan.
Yeah, thank you for that, Mr. Chairman. And that's a good prompt, Ms. Sutherland. This presentation was given at the most recent PSAP managers and 911 oversight team. That's going to be a standing item going forward for those two committees with a kind of a fiscal update, if you will. So this conversation really helps kind of provide some direction, guidance into how to have those conversations. So I think this is very helpful. So thank you.
Okay. Yeah. Well, but Karen, keep reminding us, because I think that is part of this committee, is talk about process and larger how things flow through and who gets to look at things. I think that's the point. Okay. We're done with item 6, right? We're moving to 7. Brittany, I think this is your opportunity to shine. Tell us everything that's going on.
Try.
Good.
Well, good morning, everybody. Again, thank you for letting Karen and I take time to make a statement and share some information that we feel is important. A lot of this is coming on the heels of the 911 Oversight Committee from last week, and some concerns that we had that we felt really kind of fell more to this committee, and that we felt should be discussed. One of the specific items that we wanted to bring up was discussion they had specifically surrounding a data sharing agreement. Over this year, there had been concerns addressed, reference the state's access to regional 911 data. The state 911 office confirmed with all regional PSAPs that Rapid Deploy, which is a data analytics tool that we all use, is no different from our MIS or ECATs, which is also used in our PSAPs today. In conversations with the state 911 office, I was able to obtain the following. The state 911 office does not have access to any of our Annie and Allie. And if anybody doesn't know what that is, it's automatic number information and automatic location information, which is providing like address information. The state 911 office has also sent all security information for Rapid Deploy over to MR 911. The state 911 office only has access to our call volume and call statistics, which is like call answering times. It has been verified they do not have access to name or PII information, as was stated in the Oversight Committee. HIPAA information is also protected. The PII, which is personally identified information, is only delivered to the designated PSAP. Furthermore, there's no legal document nor any specific data sharing agreement that has been signed by both parties due to the determination that no sensitive data is being shared or seen. I just want to point out that during the Oversight Committee, Ms. Graber spoke on the grant agreement, talking about section 6.9. However, I want to point out that in section 6, there's also special conditions that have been outlined. Those special conditions state, the grantee agrees to allow ADOA to deploy a data analytic tool provided by the Arizona 911 program and work with all PSAPs within their 911 system and the Arizona 911 during implementation. This grant agreement was signed by Mike Duran and the Phoenix City Clerk as recent as of June 2022. Voting on this and taking action would be a violation of the grant agreement. We need to be very careful of decisions made to ensure we are including the state 911 office in communication and decisions. Question by many of the PSAP managers is, why is this not being directed to the study committee? Additionally, the next topic within the 911 Oversight Committee was discussion about supplemental technology, which were add-on features that many of the PSAPs were getting for Avesta. We're all aware that there are other tools on the market, as has been mentioned by MR 911 and Ms. Potts during the 911 Oversight Committee. Ms. Potts mentioned live stream video, also having this type of feature come through in 10-digit number. This may be something she wants. However, I know myself and many others don't want this type of feature coming through a non-emergency number. Yes, there's a lot of vendors out there. However, integration is key. Because a PSAP manager chose Entrado versus Vesta, don't penalize the rest of the group. The state has negotiated these specific features to a price point that is attractive for procurement and has all been done through RFP, where Ms. Graber and Mike Benjamin were on the committee for next gen core services and for the call handling equipment, which options were on the contract, not just for Vesta. As PSAPs in cities, why wouldn't we all be a huge proponent in having integration of software through our call handling equipment versus having multiple logins and screens for our employees to maneuver. Next Gen 911, the whole goal of it is the network of networks and integration, not adding more screens and logins. As a PSAP, it's available. You don't have to purchase it, but it's available. Keep in mind that due to the state negotiating on behalf of 81 PSAPs within the state of Arizona, they were able to get massive discounts. Why would we want 81 disparate systems in the state? That's all I have.
Oh, thank you. Was, I don't know what the best. I remember just quickly, because there are a lot of issues discussed there. What I'm curious would be, and I want Brittany's opinion on too, is there anything in that scope of work with the consultant that will address some of your concerns? That would at least allow the consultant to weigh in on some of those issues as you read the scope of work?
Yes,
Do you feel comfortable that
absolutely.
some of that could be addressed then?
Absolutely. However, the 911 Oversight Committee put that they wanted to go to vote, put it for action on the next Oversight Committee on March 8th, where concern came from PSAP managers that why is that going to a vote to remove rapid deploy out of our PSAPs, where this should be through the study committee and through this process with the consultant. Because yes, it would be addressed through emerging 911 technologies through task 2 and also task 3.
So you're concerned there's some action that may preclude the opportunity for the consultant to look at?
Absolutely.
Nathan, Audrey, any comment on that?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We can certainly work with Chief Walker on upcoming meetings, agendas, and as it relates, so we're not crossing paths with our effort on our consultants, but addressing, of course, issues of the committees.
I guess we don't want to make any decisions now that may, with opportunity to have some input from a consultant in the next 3 or 4 months. Is that okay?
Correct.
All right. Okay, good. Okay. And there was more, but I would just want to make sure there was an opportunity to address some of those issues. Okay. The next item is an update on activities of the MAG 911 Oversight Committee. Scott?
Thank you, Chairman Brady, Chairman Phelps. So the 911 Oversight Team did meet on December 14th and our standard business meeting, if you would. I really didn't have any specific takeaways to bring to this committee. I did not believe there was any action items that were brought up that needed to come here. Just following up on some of the issues that were raised from the meeting. I believe we need to let the committee and the consultant do their work. I believe the things that were addressed really are what we're here for and what the point of bringing the consultant in is, and make recommendations to the committee. So certainly committed to that process. As far as the specifics to the data sharing, this has been a concern and issue among many of the leaderships of our jurisdictions on data sharing. So we're trying to be cautious in what information is shared. We certainly all, I think, appreciate it's important to protect data and cybersecurity issues we have. So while Brittany is right that the sharing of information is within that grant document, we wanted to make sure that all jurisdictions understood what information was being shared before we were to move forward with sharing that. This actually came up several months ago under the direction of MAG staff. They did have us continue with the feed that the state gets and is able to ascertain the data that they had asked for. And as far as any other further data, we really wanted to let the jurisdictions weigh in before we agreed to anything. So I'm certainly committed as the current chair of the 911 Oversight Team to let the consultant and the study committee do their work and bring forth recommendations. And if as a region we decide that we want to do that, I certainly have no issues with that and would represent that as well. So that was really all I think that I had out of that. There was nothing else specific action items from the committee meeting. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, so ready for item number 9. Nathan, so I was thinking about the schedule. Just remind us kind of what the timing of this group and where we're going.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I believe the next meeting as proposed on the anticipated timeline, we're looking at January 23rd or thereabouts. We can confirm that.
Okay.
Same time if that works, 10 a.m. Monday.
All right, there you go. So any requests for future agenda items? I think we covered some of that. Again, these are some important issues that are coming out of the subgroups. I think formally or informally, as you get that information or those inquiries, let's make sure, like Brittany did report out today, but let's make sure you have those so that when the consultant's on board, right, we can, maybe it's in the scope of work, but let's make sure those things are being specifically addressed by the consultant. So are there any other requests for future agenda items? Okay. Oh, sorry. Yes, I keep forgetting. Go ahead. Who was it? I'm sorry. Santiago Rodriguez, do you have a comment, please? Sorry.
Santiago Rodriguez, Goodyear PD. So a couple things going back to the budget, I'd like to bring maybe forward, maybe as a comment or maybe something to think about. Are there reports that get generated? So I'm thinking back to some of our state grants, like we were talking about earlier, like the Governor's Office of Highway Safety. So are there quarterly reports or things like that that we could maybe get? It might actually help us understand the process if it's spelled out in that. And then the other thought process that I had going through it is, instead of relaying messages or relaying information, would it be best for someone from the state to come talk to us and ask us or answer the questions that we have about the budget?
That's a great question. I think the timing of that question and the representatives from that group, we may want to make it known we'll take that opportunity, but I do think there'll be some changes at the level where we want to make sure we're not stepping on anybody's toes. And so with the new governor, I think there's going to be some changes in some of the leadership positions, as I understand it. So I do think that's a good idea. I think it's kind of the timing of when we ask the question. So let's just make note of that. I think it's definitely worth following up, but I also want to make sure we have we're speaking to the right people. So is that fair? What do you think, Nathan? And we can ask that question once they kind of get someone in those seats.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. We've made a note of that. We'll keep that in mind as transition period continues
Very good
forward
point.
and do appropriate timing on that.
Okay. All right. If there's no other items, we'll adjourn the meeting. Thank you very much.